Okay, so here we are. Welcome to everyone at the first session of continuing education series after our summer break. And here today we have Victor J. Blue for a session on journaling and writing captions in documentary practice. Victor is a photographer from New York, from the US. And you've been working on very diverse projects, on really personal projects, on assignments. You traveled quite a lot. And you've also been a mentor in one of the Foundry photojournalism workshops that still happen in person. We are very happy that Susie Katz and Kim Morris recommended you as today's lecture on this topic. So Victor, welcome to Seven Community and our continuing education series.
All right. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. And thanks for everybody here for tuning in today. I'm excited to talk about a little about writing, a little about photo practice. From what I understand, I'm talking to folks from all over the world, photographers that are in every corner of the world. So that's super exciting for me. I love talking and meeting with my colleagues all over the world and working together. So with that, I guess I'll just do a quick intro of myself. As Nika said, I'm actually based in New York City. That's where I am right now, but I'm not from here. I'm actually from North Carolina in the south of the United States. And I have a very mixed kind of practice. I do, news, I do stories, I do magazines, I do newspapers and wire services, I do local work, I do international work, and I do like personal project stuff that takes years that I wish would go faster sometimes. Yeah, and I started in working professionally in 2003 was the first time I ever got paid to shoot an assignment, and last year was 20 years. This year will be 21 years this fall. And I mainly have concentrated in all stories and news all across the US. And then I work a lot in Central America, and I work quite a bit in Afghanistan and a little bit in other countries in the kind of Middle East. So yeah, I have a mixed practice, and I'm hoping that we're going to have an interesting conversation. I can share some of that with you all today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start talking about captions.
Sorry, Victor, can I just interrupt just briefly? Just to say to everyone, if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A, not in the chat. And we will answer them towards the end of the session. But if they are very specific to something that Victor is explaining, please just write them as they go, and I'll be attentive and then ask the question to Victor. Thank you.
Okay, so as we mentioned, we're going to talk today about two kind of main things, both caption writing and journaling in your documentary photo practice. We're gonna the first part, caption writing, is going to be a little more specific and kind of the sort of the nitty gritty of how we do this and how it and how it helps our work and how it bolsters our work. And then the second part about journaling will be a little less, because the nature of journaling, it'll be a little bit less formal, and I'll kind of talk a little bit more about my approach to it. So yeah, right here is a picture of one of my typical kind of caption notebooks. So the point, why are we going to talk about why are captions so important? The point of putting captions, appending good captions to your photographs was twofold. One, to help your pictures communicate more powerfully and provide them with historical veracity that, in the digital world will hopefully stick with them forever. I'm a personal believer that no picture exists without its caption, without its context, and writing kind of effective captions is important to establish that context. And second, to kind of professionalize your work and make you more marketable to editors and clients. And really what I mean by marketable is I mean dependable and equipped to deliver what they need. And if you're going to try to work for kind of editorial publications, then they really need well made and accurate captions, well written and accurate captions. Um, you know, I gotta say, trust me on this. You're not going to remember the lady that was standing next to your main source or the name of the village visited on the last day of a campaign or a political campaign in 20 years, right? It's shocking as we grow older and as our archive and our body of work grows, how hard it is to remember some of these details that we think are cemented and we're never going to forget. And so getting into the habit of good caption writing is trust me, it's a gift to yourself down the road, and to your archive. It's going to save you time and it's going to save you a lot of headaches. I think of it like, if I don't know if you've ever come across like a old shoebox of photographs and you start kind of flipping through them. Analog pictures from long before our digital age. It's wild. I know this in my own family. If I come across an old box of family photographs, every picture that doesn't have something written on the back of it drives me insane. And honestly, a picture without a name or a date or a place scribbled on the back of it is kind of divorced from its context. And for some reason, for some modes, for some types of projects, for some kind of intellectual inquiries, that can be kind of interesting. But generally speaking, the pictures have been separated from the people and the times that they depict. And so I always kind of think about that. Like, I think captions is kind of the scribble and pencil of, the great aunt's name on the back of the photograph that kind of preserves her memory moving forward. So captions in the digital age are written and appended into the IPTC fields of digital photographs. It stands for the International Press Telecommunications Council. You didn't need to know that. I just looked that up. Depending on your client, you're going to need to include information in different IPTC fields. They should tell you which those are, or kind of like send you a guide when you get an assignment. And I work for a lot of different clients, and I have to kind of remember to who I'm working for and what their both caption style is and which fields they want filled out. But we'll kind of take a look at that a little bit later, um, and talk about that when we're looking at IPTC fields. So the first thing I tell you about writing good captions is to start with good reporting. So getting into the habits of effective reporting as you're out photographing as a part of your photo practice is vital for having the information you need to write good captions. It's also just going to make it much easier for you because you're not going to have to jump on the phone. You get home, it's been a few days, you forgot a couple things, you're on deadline, you can't remember a key thing, you have to start working the phone, jumping on the phone, or getting on Google Maps trying to figure out where you were. It's so much easier to have that stuff at your fingertips and to confirm it live when you're in the place, when you're on the ground. For captions, there's kind of two ways to do it. You can either keep a small notebook on your person or in your photo gear, or you can use a digital app. It's kind of up to you. I feel like for me, because I'm a little older and I kind of come from a pre-internet, pre-smartphone age, I kind of lament that my notebook practice is slipping a little bit. My caption notebook practice. Nowadays, I do rely on the Notes app in my iPhone much more than I used to. And that's kind of sad in a way because I have years of notebooks at this point that I can come back and refer to. But the digital app has its advantages. Chief among them, if I'm working on a longer story or kind of a bigger story and I have to type up notes, when I come home at night, I can take that Notes app with the stuff that I've jammed into it and I can type out real quick a page of the day's notes, reporting notes for not just photography or captions, but for other things I might need to do, like write a memo to an editor or a writer or reporter, or write and report my own story. So the digital app has its charms for sure. I'm trying to figure out a way I can kind of go back and forth between them, but we'll see. I think it's super important when you're maintaining a notebook or the digital app to date your pages. I mean, even though the iPhone like organizes, them by date, I just go ahead and type the date in at the front of every iPhone note, and definitely at the top of each page. Not dating your pages is a good way to shoot yourself in the foot. And in your notebook, try to include as many notes like as you can, besides just names of people and places you go to. Try to jot down as many observations, reminders, impressions, and especially the notebook is great for jotting down quotes. Like just a short quote that somebody says while you're there, you can get it exactly right. You can even ask them to repeat themselves if you missed something. But the notebook is excellent and flexible that way, and can and all of that's going to help out your caption writing. Another aspect of good reporting is being careful to confirm name spellings. This is vital. Some cameras at this point have like a record feature where you can kind of push a button on the back and speak into a little microphone. And so, I've seen photographers, I don't use this very often. I should use it more. I've seen photographers like hit the record button and hold it up to the subject of the photograph and have them spell their name, not say their name, spell their name into the back of the camera, or they'll ask them and then they themselves will spell it into the back of the camera. And what that does is it appends a small audio file to the actual photograph. So when you get back and you're in your editing program, you can hit play and listen to it, and you can get that spelling if you didn't get a chance to write it down. For me, it's just easier to write it down. I always write it down on a notebook, and then I kind of show it to I hold it up like, oh, hey, here, does this look right to you? Is this the correct spelling? Another thing about your notebook that I find looking back over mine is being really specific about place names is super important. Over the course of the day, you might range over, a variety, like some different locations, maybe different neighborhoods in a city, maybe different, small towns in a rural setting or countryside. You might cross a river. Gosh, I can't tell you how many times that I have broken my back trying to figure out the name of a river I drove over or I took a picture near, and I forgot to write it down when I was there. So being specific about place names is good practice to get into as well. Here's an image of years of my caption notebooks that I keep in my bag. I like to keep kind of a small notebook that's easy to kind of pull out, put back. You can kind of see there after a while, I got kind of hooked on one kind of notebook, both for kind of the consistency, but also because these certain, it doesn't matter, any notebook. I mean, over the years, I've for sure used like a 50-cent note, kids school notebook that I bought at a corner store somewhere or a small shop. But I like these Write in the Rain notebooks because they're very tough. I mean, obviously, because you can write in the rain, but the paper's tough, the binding's tough, the covers are plastic. And I found that they just really hold up over the years, and they can take a lot of abuse. And that's important to me that when I get home, that the covers don't fall off and that the pages don't fall out in case I have to go back and reference them. So that's a little pro tip. They're kind of expensive though, so don't get hung up on that. Just use whatever's handy. So when it comes to writing captions for your pictures, AP style is the gold standard. AP style has been kind of the basic industry standard for way longer than I've been doing this. And it offers a kind of, like I said, a sort of standardized approach that almost any editor you work with is going to be overjoyed to get photographs with AP style captions. So an AP style caption consists of 2 sentences, and they tell the who, what, when, and where of a photograph. They're written in narrative form and in the present tense. The first sentence identifies the subject of the photograph, describes the action depicted, and where and when it took place. So here's a first sentence right here from a AP style caption that I wrote for a recent assignment in the summer. Parishioners lay hands on prayer leader Chris Bowman as they attend an intercessionary prayer service at Global Vision Bible Church in Mount Juliet, Tennessee on Friday, May 31st, 2024. So you'll kind of see there that this is like the standard template, the things that this includes, right? It includes the specific day and date. I like to include the day of the week. Uh, that's also AP style to include the day of the week. The specific place name, the town and the state. Um, Usually, if you're working for one of your own domestic, in whatever country it is, if you're working for one of your domestic news outlets, AP style leaves out the country name. But you know, if you're working for an international publication and you're in a different country, it's a good idea to put the country name in there. That's why I left it out, because I shot this here in the United States. And you can see that I have the subject of the sentence is the subject's actually
Victor,
parishioners.
sorry, can I
Yep.
just disturb a bit? Because the slides are not changing at all. We're still at slide number 1. So, Doug, thank you for alerting us. I just thought you're doing a long
Oh
introduction.
no.
Sorry for that. So, we are still at number 1.
If you guys, yeah. So let me look at the questions real quick to see if there's anything people didn't understand. Yeah, I can't see the screen. Yeah, it's mostly can't see the screen. Okay, there's a question from Tequila. How do you organize your notebooks? Do you file them by date or assignment? And up to now, how many of these caption notebooks do you have? Oh, Lord, I have, I don't know, at this point, probably 3 or 4 dozen. No, more than that. I'm sure I have 100 of these caption notebooks. I don't file them by date or assignment. When one gets full, I just tend to write like the year or it usually takes me about, back in the day, it would take me longer than it does now. Usually takes me about, you know, I don't have 100. I probably have 3 to 4 dozen, 5 dozen maybe. And I just write the months that are, well, here, I'll show you, actually, because now we're in this, I can kind of show you.
Yeah,
Um,
and Doug also
Again, I
asked
covered
if
this, so
then,
I'm so sorry we weren't,
no problem, no problem. It's just
pardon,
that,
Nika?
no, Doug just asked if then you can also read out loud again the caption and just show it, so it's gonna
Yep,
be, thank you so much.
great. Yeah, so here's the reporting stuff I kind of talked about. Um, Good reporting, gather information in the field, keep a notebook or digital app, careful to confirm names, spellings, just be specific about place names and their spellings as well. Okay, here's a picture of all my notebooks. Sorry you guys didn't see this before. Um, not these are not all my notebooks. This is just a few of them I dragged out of a box. Uh, you can see there, Tequila, that I kind of have, fall 2011, or I have, 2019, Randy PR Guatemala. So that was a feature I did about a soldier named Randy Hoffman. I went to Puerto Rico and I did a story in Guatemala. I was in Guatemala again that year. So, some of them are Afghanistan notebooks. I just, like 2013 Afghanistan, that whole notebook is just those 3 provinces I worked in that year, right? I was doing a lot of reporting. I was using my notebook a lot. So it just kind of depends. But I do like to write the year and hopefully the month on them. Um, that helps me out. And as I was saying before, here, these are those consistent, I was talking about the Write in the Rain notebook. So you can see like the bottom 2 rows, right, are all that same kind of notebook with the plastic cover. Um, Really the only thing that matters is that you don't even have to be consistent about it. It's just I think most journalists like in the end to kind of have a sort of consistent kind of thing going with their notebooks. Um, but it's the same as having a preference for a certain kind of memory card, right? It doesn't really matter. It's up to you. Okay, back to AP style captions. I'm so sorry you guys didn't see these. I'm glad we're seeing them now. Okay. Um, as I said, they're the gold standards. 2 sentences, the who, what, when, and where of a photograph, written in narrative form and the present tense. And so here's an example of a first sentence from an AP style photograph, right? It identifies the subject of the photograph, describes the action, and where and when. So as I said before, here you've got it ends with Friday, May 31st, 2024, right? As I said, AP styles to include the day of the week. I like doing that. It's just for accuracy's sake. And then if somebody in 15 years, you don't have to go back and figure out, did this happen on a Thursday or a Monday, because you already have it right there. The specific place name, commas, everything separated by commas, the place names from the day of the week, date, and year. And then, so this one has like the subject of the sentence is I'll show you the picture in the next slide or right after this. The parishioners are the subject of the sentence. They lay hands on, the object of the sentence, leader Chris Bowman, as they attend, right? So it's the action of the photograph is quite clear. So that would be a typical opening, like first sentence of an AP style caption. The second sentence needs to provide context. It should contain relevant background, observations, and reporting. Try to avoid editorializing in your second sentence, or speculating about things that may or may not have happened that you maybe did or that you didn't see. Including a quote from the subject is a major plus. Though not strict AP style, after these, you can include your photo credit. So my second sentence is, the church is headed by Pastor Greg Locke, founder of Global Vision Bible Church, one of a cadre of evangelical pastors increasingly involved in deliverance ministry or the casting out of demons that has gained him a huge social media following. Okay, right? My caption, the point of the caption is not to tell the entire story, in this little caption field. It's to provide enough context that if the photo for some reason is disaggregated from the bulk of the pictures, it somehow is used or ends up out of context, that it has just enough context to know not just who these people are and what they're doing, but why they're doing it, and a little bit of background on it, right? So here's the whole sentence together. Parishioners lay hands on prayer leader Chris Bowman as they attend an intercessionary prayer service at Global Vision Bible Church in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, on Friday, May 31st, 2024. The church is headed by Pastor Greg Locke, founder of Global Vision Bible Church, one of a cadre of evangelical pastors increasingly involved in deliverance ministry or the casting out of demons that has gained him a huge social media following. So does that make sense to everybody? That's the image, and then the caption hopefully makes sense on it. So for real quick, for the next couple minutes or so, I'm going to scroll through just a handful of pictures so you can kind of see the image and then see the caption that I came up with and how they kind of relate, right? So here we have a picture of a military patrol in Afghanistan, 2009. Private First Class Lonnie Carter of 3rd Platoon Delta Company of the 287 Infantry Regiment, 3rd Brigade, 10th Mountain Division, based at Kop Syedabad, searches an Afghan man so he and his family can pass through a U.S. position during a mission to the Angkai Valley in Wardak Province, Afghanistan, Wednesday, June 10th, 2009. Now, this one is a little bit of an incomplete because I don't have a second sentence on here. That was because, this is part of a larger body of work, and I really try to always have that second sentence. But the reason I showed you this one is that it's really important to be as specific as you can about not just place names, but about identifiers of people that you're photographing, right? So, if any of you guys are going to end up trying to cover any kind of military stories or stories that involve active military units, it's vitally important for history's sake to record the kind of unit designation of those folks, so kind of specifically who they are, for a variety of reasons. One is in case down the line there's a question of legality or a human rights sort of question. We saw that recently with the investigation by the New Yorker into the Haditha massacres in Iraq in the early aughts, right? And they're actually, even though I don't think they include them in that project, there was a photojournalist who did document the aftermath of that. And if you didn't know exactly which platoon you were talking about, and if you didn't know, like the kind of, because there's in the U.S. military, there's thousands or probably hundreds and hundreds of third platoons of a Delta company, right? So you kind of have to know that it's part of this regiment, part of this brigade, and part of this division. It also helps to know where they were based. So all this stuff is important to kind of to record, and it's gonna and again it's gonna give that photograph uh, you know legs, so to speak, what we call legs. It's gonna allow that photograph to continue um, to have relevancy into the future, right? Here's another image. So this is from the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. So here, rioters attempt to breach the north door of the U.S. Capitol building after they earlier stormed the building during a day of protests against the certification of President-elect Joe Biden's win in Washington, D.C., Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. Congress meets today to certify the vote of the Electoral College after weeks of legal challenges and baseless claims of fraud by President Trump and his supporters. And then I've got my photo credit there. So this one kind of presents an interesting challenge, right? I personally think that, and most of your kind of professional editors are going to require like a level of kind of or an attempt towards objectivity in your reporting and in your caption writing. So this presents a problem. How do we describe these individuals who, and what words do we use to describe this event? This is like a very politically loaded event, as many of you probably realize, right? How do we describe them as protesters? Do we describe them as insurrectionists? Are they attacking? Are they protesting? What's the nature of how we describe this? And as journalists, we have a lot of power, right, and how we communicate to folks. We also have a lot of responsibility. And so, I try my best to try to kind of, it's not an issue of splitting the difference or trying to always be in the middle. That's not it. I just try to be as accurate as possible and try to avoid language that's overly politically loaded. But in this case, right, I felt that, rioters for me was an appropriate description of these folks and of their actions that day. And right after weeks of this playing out in the courts and playing out in our society, there were no credible, and after weeks of claims by President Trump, there's no credible evidence of fraud. So I felt comfortable using this phrase in the background: baseless claims of fraud by President Trump. Right? I mean, this was after 2 months of this Stop the Steal movement that had produced no evidence. If it was different, if it had produced evidence, I'd have to write that differently. But I just want to kind of key in on that I'm trying, even though this caption can kind of sound that way, I'm trying very hard to not use like overly politically loaded language in my captions. Okay, I'm just going to check the questions real quick, Nika, if that's okay, because I just want to be real clear about this. And there's a couple about this.
Yeah.
Should captions be neutral, as in not opinionated? From Susan. The answer is, or I saw you mark that, Nick. I'm sorry, but yes, they should be as neutral as you can possibly make them. Your captions, having your captions neutral is a very important part of establishing your credibility as a reporter. So, we'll talk a little later. There's different captions for different kind of uses, but if you're, this discussion today is going to center around editorial kind of photography, photojournalism, trying to photograph and then publish in newspapers and magazines and online outlets and video and every other kind of platform that exists now for reporting the news. And so, yes, trying to avoid being opinionated is key. Oh man, what will be your best advice for people that are really bad at writing and for non-native English speakers? From Anastas. That's a great question, Anastas. I totally get it. I'm going to talk about that in just a second, which is kind of funny. but kind of the reason I even sort of got to hang out with photographers is because I was able to help non-native English speakers write better captions. My best advice is to spend a little bit of time online on one of your on like either the AP site or like Getty Images. The Getty Images is almost kind of easier because Getty aggregates so many different kind of news outlets, right? Like I shoot a lot for Bloomberg News, and our work is marketed to Getty Images. But go on one of either Reuters, AP, Getty. AP is probably the best one, I would say, and then but Getty's good too. And then get on there and like make a bunch of copies of the captions that you see on there. That's how I learned to write captions. Is I would like go online and go on the wires and see what they had put on their captions, and then I would just try to emulate it, you know. And especially for like non-native English speakers, the thing I would do, and we'll talk about this in a kind of when we talk about photo mechanic here in a minute, is create like a template. That you can kind of always work from, right? There's nothing worse than staring at like a blank document or a blank caption field and having to write it from scratch. I hate doing that. I try to give myself like something to start from. So give yourself like a template, you know, that then you can plug in different information into, like a new name or a new action and a new date. That'll help you out. It's not possible to always ask these details, especially conflict situation. How would you navigate that situation? So, yeah, that's certainly true. Although from Mumin, hi, thank you, Mumin. I think that your notebook is your friend in this case, right? Writing down observations, writing down things you hear. Maybe even if you hear something, you write it down and you confirm it afterwards. But even just having it written in your notebook is going to remind you, to go back and confirm that detail or confirm that name. I find that most times people react quite well to asking them how to spell their name. You know, I mean, for sure you're going to be doing something and you're going to ask somebody their name and they're going to tell you, "I'm not giving you my name." And fair. That's nothing you can do about that. If someone says they don't want to give you their name, you can't force them. Usually, the kind of work that we end up doing, usually you're spending close time with people, even in a conflict setting, and you establish some kind of a rapport, and they're going to end up being comfortable telling you what their name is, and asking them how to spell it is always a kind of a good icebreaker because it shows that you care enough to understand, care enough about them to get the spelling of their name correct. So I find that to be a good kind of tool. All right, I'll get to the next question. Yeah, so I'm going to move on, and then if there's any more questions, I'll try and keep up with it. So this photograph of my own grandfather. This is from a personal project that I did for many, many years, and I just kind of include this to show you that, like, and I published this project even though it was a personal project about my family. We published it editorially in a newspaper years ago, and so the caption is Richard, and then in quotes, Dick Taylor, that's his nickname, wipes down his 3-year-old filly CC Hardistry after a training mile on March 26, 2011. Taylor, the photographer's grandfather, has trained and raced harness horses in central Indiana for more than 65 years. So this one has a couple of interesting, even though it's very short, it has a kind of interesting wrinkle to it. Notice that in the first sentence, right, with the, I see that I left out the name of the city. That was bad. I should have done that. But anyway, I like refer to wiping down his 3-year-old filly, but you don't know that she's a racehorse. That's what the second sentence is for. In the second sentence, I communicate that, the subject, Taylor, has trained and raced harness horses in central Indiana. So then you know that it's a racehorse situation, right? That the horse that provides that context that the first sentence kind of sets up the information, and the second sentence kind of fills it out. So that's what I want you guys to kind of think about between your first and second sentence. Here's an image I made just recently for an assignment here in town for the newspaper. Police clear street vendors as residents gather outside the hall, a large migrant shelter in the Clinton Hill neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York, Wednesday, July 25th, 2024. Over 4,000 migrants are sheltered at the complex, and after a shooting last Sunday left 2 people dead, neighborhood residents have organized to oppose the extension of the city lease of the facility, right? So that second sentence has like a lot of reporting kind of to it, right? It's got the background on the migrant shelter and the number of people that are there. It kind of gives you a hint that the reason that the paper is out there doing a story is in the context of a recent act of violence, and also this neighborhood kind of rejection of the shelter and of the situation. Now you'll notice that, and so to get back to I think it was Mumin asked the question about getting people's names. So this is a situation where I just wasn't in a position to get people's names, right? The migrants that I'm photographing don't want to be named. They don't want to give their names. Most of them don't. Some of them do, but this is like a kind of documentary picture as things are happening, and it's hard to stop the action and ask people's names. And there wasn't really like a key subject here. And then, in this city, NYPD officers aren't really their name generally. You can ask them sometimes. You can write down the last name on their badge, but they're general too. So I didn't have names for this one, so I made sure that I just try to, I accurately describe the two groups, right? I know that they're NYPD officers. I know they're police, and I know these guys are street vendors because I was there watching them sell. It was awesome watching them sell coffee and sandwiches on the street. So this is a case where I didn't have I didn't have a individual subject in the photograph, but still trying to be accurate with how I describe folks. A recent portrait that I had to shoot, the caption: retired 4-star General John Allen poses for a portrait at his home in Mount Vernon, Virginia, Friday, March 22nd, 2024. General Allen, former commander of NATO International Security Assistance Force and U.S. Forces Afghanistan, US-4A. He oversaw the war in the years that General Abdul Razik rose to become the most powerful figure in southern Afghanistan, eventually to be accused of hundreds of human rights violations, including cases of torture and extrajudicial executions. And then my photo credit. So here's an interesting one. Sometimes it's a challenge to describe action, right? Something happening in a picture. And I am personally a firm believer in kind of like giving the reader a cue that they are seeing a directed kind of portrait, or they're seeing a kind of documentary photograph, or like a candid image of an act of activity actually taking place. So I use that phrase a lot: poses for a portrait, right? That's an active verb, and that's what the subject, General Allen, is doing. He's sitting at his table, he's posing for a portrait. We've set up a light, clearly, we've organized this picture. The reader shouldn't think that it's like a kind of that it's a candid moment, and there's lots of clues here that they wouldn't think that it was a candid moment, right? I want to be transparent with them between the moments, because obviously as a photojournalist, I don't ever set up a documentary photo situation or a news situation, right? I'm not directing participants. I'm not yelling at them or telling them to do this or that. But in a portrait situation, that's a different mode of working. And so I want to give cues to the reader that that's what they're seeing, and the caption reinforces that by saying poses for a portrait, right? Another one, a documentary photograph from Standing Rock for a story I did out there. So this is interesting. This has a little bit different style. The New York Times, for many years, kind of adopted a different style than an AP style, and they wanted your date up front. And so I adapted the caption for that style at that time. To be totally honest with y'all, I'm not sure if the New York Times has a kind of overall caption style right now. They don't publish one, and I've generally file AP style captions to them. Well, pretty much always do, and they're fine with them. So I don't think that they have one consistent caption style, and if they do, they're not angry at me about AP style. I can tell you that. So, but here's an interesting challenge. So the caption: 8/2/2019, Fort Yates, North Dakota. Jace Longfeather, 21, practices an exchange as his brother Justin, 18, sends it off, and their dad, Richard Longfeather, 56, a Lakota native of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, holds another as they train for an Indian relay race at the rodeo grounds in Fort Yates. Indian relay is a form of horse racing practiced by Native American tribes in the Plains states. Mr. Longfeather, a speaker of the Lakota language, and his sons have fielded a successful relay team for the last 5 years, racing across the West. So usually, especially in the West, you want to identify your subjects left to right. But what do you do in the photo, right? So in this photo, we have three subjects, and left is the father, right? Richard. In the middle is the son, Justin. And on the right is son, Jace. So normally you would say, Richard Longfeather, son, Justin, son, Jace. Here's the problem. The action of the picture, right? The subject of the photograph really is the one on the right. It's Jace riding this horse. And if you do it the opposite, if I was to do it the kind of conventional way, left to right, then it's going to sound goofy. And you're going to be like, why am I reading about this other guy when what's really happening is with the sun? So that's why that's a time when you'll want to kind of change that style a little bit. Same thing here. This is a scenario during COVID. Eliana Marcela Rendon, 32, caresses her grandmother, Carmen Evelia Torres, 74, as she dies from COVID-19. As her husband, Edison Valencia, 48, looks on, and licensed social worker Elisa Vicari holds a tablet to live stream the event for family that cannot be present at her bedside. So you'll see here, I tried to, instead of saying kind of left to right, I tried to describe the action of each participant so you could tell, right? You know that the woman holding the tablet is going to be, Elisa Vicari, and that because I said caresses her grandmother, who Eliana, the real subject of the photograph, is. So, you kind of want to tweak your caption a little bit to be able to kind of communicate these things. I have a couple more. Go through these real quick. Mosul, Ahmed, a young man, stopped from fleeing Mosul by SWAT members who recognized him as ISIS members, beaten in the village of Sherazad on the east side of Mosul, Iraq, Sunday, November 7th, 2016. Now, I included this one because I give a little bit of reporting here, a little bit of background, and then I have this sentence. It is not known what happened to him after, right? I am pretty sure that this guy was summarily executed, but I didn't witness it. So I can't say that. I witnessed this event happening until, they took him away and we weren't allowed to follow. And so I'm only really kind of reporting to the best of my knowledge, like what I saw firsthand. And I didn't have anyone, look, clearly no one's going to confirm that they dragged this guy out in the back and executed him. So I had to kind of say what I could say, for sure. What I know is it does not know what happened to him after. That makes sense. Here's a quite recent picture. Again, this is from the Republican National Convention in July in the U.S. Former President Donald Trump sits in front of his daughters, Ivanka Left and Tiffany Wright, before he accepts the Republican nomination for president on the final night of the Republican National Convention, RNC, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, U.S., on Thursday, July 18th, 2024. A couple things I point out about this one. Usually for major figures, publicly known figures, I don't usually worry about including their age. That's not that important for me because anybody can Google or, Wikipedia any of these three individuals and find out how old they are and when they were born. It's more important to include ages on folks that are not famous that you're photographing in the course of your kind of documentary work. I would keep that in mind. And including ages on folks, I always ask folks how old they are. And it's a good way to kind of, if people are reluctant to tell you, it's a good opportunity to kind of build some rapport with them. Oh, you don't look like you're older than 22 years old. Oh no, I'm much older. Okay. That's a good opportunity to kind of, have a nice interaction with folks. If folks demand that they don't tell me how old they are, I don't push it. I'm like, okay, no problem. But it helps in identifying folks down the line. Two people could have a similar name. That's happened to me before. Somebody's asked, found a picture of mine, an editor, and they call me up. They say, oh, we're doing a story about this person you photographed years ago. And then we come to find out that it's not the same person, because of the age. So that's a helpful thing to include. Final one, an early picture of mine from 2005. Gang members of the Mara 18 are held in the El Oyon prison in Escuintla, Guatemala, Tuesday, August 23rd, 2005. Eloyon was the scene of a prison riot the week before in which members of a rival gang, the Mata Salvatrucha, massacred 23 members of the Mata 18 using firearms, knives, and hand grenades. So that's a pretty solid 2 sentences. That's a pretty solid caption right there. But because I kind of know that this picture is going to have some historical significance and it's going to be important down the line, I also included these other 2 paragraphs. I'm not going to read through them, but the 2 paragraphs give a ton more detail and reporting about what I saw, and stuff I recorded over the kind of couple of days that I documented this event, and that I called from news reports at the time as well. Uh, I think that, there's room for this sometimes in your day-to-day kind of working life. If you send a caption this long to an editor, they're not going to be super appreciative. It's like a lot of extra, information that they don't necessarily need. But for yourself and your own archive, it's a good idea to have this information in there and to do the extra work, because I can't tell you how many times I've had to write like a grant proposal or had to write, something, look back on something I couldn't remember a detail, how many pistols were used, and then I can open up my captions. I can just drag a folder of pictures in, hit the info button in Photo Mechanic, and I have it right there. I can copy and paste it into a document, into something else I'm writing, into a grant proposal, whatever. It's right there at my fingertips, and it's right there with the photographs. I don't have to go digging through my documents folder to try to find that reporting from years ago. So real quick, and okay, I'm going to look at so questions. Yeah, there's a lot of reporting. Yeah, I'm going to go through IPTC right now. Okay, this is a good one. Masi asks, is it okay if the second sentence repeats in every caption of a series, or does it have to be different for each image? For like working wise, for filing pictures, it's okay if the second sentence is the same as long as the thing you're photographing is kind of the same, right? But say that you had a long day of photographing and you did one thing in the morning and then you went out in the afternoon and did something else, then I would update that second sentence, right? I would update that second sentence with with a little more context for that image. So yeah, usually I would say my second sentence repeats in every caption of a series, but there's also plenty of times when I change that second sentence, when a published story includes multiple related, so Syed wants to know, when a published story includes multiple related photos, how much details are you writing in each caption? I'm writing quite a bit in each caption, because here's the thing. You don't know exactly where your photographs are going to end up, right? And you're doing the captions both for your editor, both for the outlet, but also for yourself. Photographs tend to, the kind of work that all of us are engaged in, we hope is going to be important, in the future to help understand our times now. And so having really effective captions with as much detail as you can include is vital. Now, the minimum is having 2 sentences, one that does the who, what, when, and where, and another that provides some context. If you have that, you're in pretty good shape. But if you have a lot of other details that you think need to jump from your notebook into the captions, don't be afraid to add those. That would be my best advice. I don't, to be honest, I don't know a lot about GPS data, Odysseus. I don't know a lot about GPS data in photos through Photo Mechanic. And to be honest, there's different schools of thought about this. Usually GPS data is normally appended in a different set of information in a photograph. That's the EXIF, the EXIF data, and that includes exposure, aperture, shutter speed, like that kind of technical detail. And usually GPS is included there. I have that. I usually turn that off, and that's like a bigger conversation that folks can have about whether or not to use GPS data. It depends on what kind of story you're doing, what you're doing. I photograph in a lot of places that I don't want like the authorities to be able to tell exactly where I took a photo. So I just have it always turned off for me. I don't find that GPS data, maybe I'm wrong about this in the future, but because the captions, the photos have strong captions and say where they were taken, for me, GPS data is less important. But I understand that if it is for other photographers, and I don't exactly know that, I would Google how to add that in Photo Mechanic if I was you. Okay, so real quick, IPTC fields. These are going to vary to some degree depending on your client and on what kind of caption you're doing. The most important are the caption, the description writer, the creator photographer, copyright, keywords, credit, and then date, city, state, or province and country fields. There are lots more of these that you might have to fill out depending on the client, but these are the most important, right? So, each newspaper has a different, the New York Times wants you to put a certain code number in a certain, in the source field. And then the Washington Post, they have a whole PDF of things you have to fill out so that, and the point of all these IPTC fields is when the pictures flow into their content, their backend, their content management system, they get sorted by these different fields. And so you just have to be attuned and you have to know what your client needs. Another thing to remember is that batch captioning your images makes captioning much easier and is a great habit. So these days, I'm not always as diligent about this as I would like to, but I try to batch caption a whole folder of images, at least with a generic caption that applies to all of them, at least once. And then for my selected final toned images, I'll go back in and I will edit that batch caption in order to have a specific one that relates to that particular picture, right? So here's kind of like a blow up of the different IPTC fields, and hopefully you guys can kind of see my cursor. I'm going to kind of point to them. Right at the top is the description and caption. This is the what's called the IPTC notebook or notepad in Photo Mechanic. The description writer, I just put my initials. Creator photographer, I got my name in there, my byline. My byline is like a little different from my name. I include my middle initial in it, so I make sure I have that in there. I have a copyright notice in there. I'm not great about copyright stuff, so you guys should definitely, that's something as especially new photographers, you guys want to build into your practice early on. I have not been good at that. But yeah, those are the main fields. Oh, this is the template. Sorry, here it is. So now you're seeing, it's the same. This is the IPTC for an individual frame, an individual picture, and then this is the template that you would use to kind of apply, right? And you can kind of see some of the differences. You got here you have your city, your state, country, country code, and then down here a couple credit and source are a couple of other key fields that different clients will want you to enter. They don't matter so much for you. You'll kind of see that I'm pretty bad about using my keywords. That's a great habit to get into. I find that these days, keywording is a little bit less important because most, even your Mac, can search the caption field of your picture. So it's not going to include stuff. A lot of people, it's important for folks to have large image archives to have like verticals or portrait or child or mother or like keywords like that so they can find certain photographs if marketing those kind of stock images is part of your business practice. It's not part of mine, so I don't worry about it too much. The key thing for me is, can I find all the pictures that I made in Georgia? Can I find all the pictures I made in Guatemala? And usually these days, most kind of search programs are able to access your caption. So that's not a good excuse. You should definitely do it. So these are some quick considerations, and I'm going to do a quick demo of how to use Photo Mechanic to put in captions. Some considerations to think about as you move forward. Writing good captions is key to making good pictures. No picture exists without context or its caption. So for me, I mean, being an effective caption writer is exactly the same as being an effective photographer, making interesting pictures. If you're not captioning them, in a kind of consistent and professional way, I don't care how great or how beautiful or how much of a great photograph it is. It just doesn't mean as much if it doesn't have a caption on it, to me. Try to hone your writing so the captions read naturally. This isn't literature, but really avoid simple grammatical and spelling mistakes. Because if you include simple grammatical or spelling mistakes, your editor is going to have to correct them. Now, I know that's a major disadvantage for the majority of you who are working around the world. And the bottom line is that our most of our publishing infrastructure and most of the business, honestly, is based in the northern countries and Western countries, and that all speak English. So I know that's a major disadvantage. And being, a strong English speaker is just going to be, for you guys, is going to be a cost of doing business. It's going to be something you have to figure out. But trying to avoid grammatical and spelling mistakes, so your editor doesn't have to go back in and fix them, is going to really endear you to that editor. The whole point of doing this is to avoid corrections at all costs, right? The last thing you want is for a news outlet to have to issue a correction over a mistake you made in a caption. That's that's a situation that you just don't ever want to have to deal with. That's terrible. So double check them and stay vigilant. The truth is, I never filed a picture in my life that didn't have an AP style caption on it. The part of that, the way that I was able to ingratiate myself to the first photographers that I met, who I'm still friends with, is I was hanging around and they were Spanish speakers and they had to file captions in English. And, I was an English speaker. So they kind of asked me, hey, Vic, can you come over here and check out this caption? Can you take a look at it? And so then I started to kind of research and look and see, okay, how are people doing this? What kind of captions or I would look on the wire and see, okay, how does Reuters write their captions? How does AP write their captions? And I kind of learned that way. And then I'd kind of say, okay, I think I could write a little better caption than that. I could see the picture. I could see what the photographer wrote. I think I could do a little better. And then so I became like the hero for the guys in the office because I would write these like great captions. Their editors would be happy and would praise them like, oh, thanks, these are great captions. And so they would want me to come hang out some more. So that was a good kind of way to get in with folks. For me, of course, that was easy for me because I spoke, as I'm a native English speaker, and it was quite easy for me. So for you folks who aren't native English speakers, I'm sorry, it's not fair, but it's going to be important for you to practice that. That said, of course, I do caption images for publications, not so much these days, but over the years, a lot in other languages. Right, I've had to caption Spanish, the only other language I speak, quite a bit. So, and depending on the client you're working for, the caption, you got to remember this. It might be a rough draft for a copy editor or a photo editor that they're going to have to change later or for them to work with, or it might go straight to a wire service kind of as is. And it's good to know the policies and practices for each outlet. But AP style is widely adopted and will almost always be welcome, right? So those are some things to kind of remember about captions. And so real quick, I'm going to stop this screen share and I'm going to switch over to Photo Mechanic. So I'm just going to, I have a folder of images that I'm going to kind of run through and caption real quick. Oh, wait, so I don't think that worked. Share screen, that one. Okay, there we go. All right. So, wait a quick second. I'm gonna shut the door. Okay, so we have a folder of images here. These are pictures I took over the course of the day of shooting a local assignment. You'll see here that the IPTC information, which I accessed by hitting, in your Photo Mechanic. I know some folks are not using Photo Mechanic and you're using Lightroom. I apologize that I'm not as conversant with Lightroom. I don't use it. I use Adobe Photoshop, but I don't use Lightroom. But I'm going to go through this in Photo Mechanic, and hopefully you guys can lean on each other for some advice about how to do this. But I do know that you can batch caption and do all this. The Lightroom has all this functionality. So I have this folder of images. You can see that the metadata is blank for these. I'm going to select them all, and then I'm going to go to a functionality called under image, the metadata IPTC template. Okay. Open that thing up. Now, this is full from the last kind of caption that I made, right? And so it's already got stuff in it. I can either clear it out completely using the clear button. I can either, or I can save this caption to use later, and I can load a different caption, right? So I think for this, so another key thing I'll point out here is on this kind of event and location area at the top right here, there are options for how to enter the date and time of the picture, right? I can hit date and I can enter it manually. I can hit today, so it'll just automatically put today's date on whatever pictures I'm applying the template to. I can go to the capture time, whatever time the camera says that I shot the photograph, which is great if you have your time and date set correctly in your camera and you're not moving between time zones. Or you can do modification time whenever, when you did something to change the photographs. So I usually have it set to capture time because I'm usually pretty good about having my camera time and date set. So I like to leave it there, and then I don't have to worry about, did I go in and change and forget to change the date? That's something that'll really make your editors mad if you're sending in pictures that have the wrong date on them. So just to start with a clean slate here, I'm just going to hit clear. So now all these are empty. And then I'm going to hit load, and I'm going to go through and use a caption that I've saved. Okay, so I'm thinking, all right, I shot all these here in New York City. This was a day that I went and visited a park where some migrants are having to sleep outside. So pretty close to this recent story I did on this migrant shelter. So I'm going to open that. I'm going to load that caption. Okay, wow. Now you can see that a bunch of these fields have kind of been populated, right? We'll start here. I explained the capture time issue here in the top right. Below that, top right, we have the city. I've already got that filled in. Great thing about Photo Mechanic is it's got these drop down arrows, and you can kind of, add cities or remove cities from this menu, right? I can hit edit cities and I can type in a new one. Paris, and add it, right? Great. Now, when I hit this drop down, Paris is included in there, all in alphabetical order, right? It's an excellent kind of feature. And you can do that for most of these fields. Even you can even edit captions. You can have captions saved in here that you can hit this drop down menu and automatically hit them, and it'll go by the first line. So that's an excellent functionality. So city, I've got Brooklyn. That's, like I said, this is a caption from a similar story that I'm kind of populating it with. New York, USA. The difference between the country and country code, this is like the full name of the countries, and the country code is a 3-letter kind of code for all these different. It's quite helpful, and it helps photo editors again kind of move pictures around in their back end. On the left-hand side here, I've got the caption, which I'm going to change here in a second. Description writer. Also, something else to note, sorry, that each of these fields has to have this check mark next to it. So if you're looking here at the top left corner, I'm hovering over the description and caption kind of field. If I uncheck it, it's not going to append the caption to the photograph. If I check it, it will. So you'll see that I have some fields that aren't checked because they're not important for me to include on my caption, right? I have, going down under image rights, I have creator photographer, but I don't have creator's identity. I don't even know what that means. I don't need it. I don't need creator's job title. I mean, of course, as long as the field is empty, it's not going to put anything in there, but I only have checked the things that I really know I'm going to need, or I try to. And then, obviously down here, there's tons and tons of functionality, tons and tons of information that you can include in this IPTC. Most of the stuff that I don't generally use, there are some clients that use it, so it's good to be aware that it's there, but generally the key things are right here in the top. Caption, event and location, and image rights. Those are your 3 key kind of fields that you want to be paying attention to. So, what are we going to do next here? We've got the event and location. We got the capture time, city is correct, state is correct, country is correct. Great. My information, my byline here and here, both credit and creator photographer. This source field is important for the client. So I'm just going to, I would enter a new one for this assignment, but I'll just delete it for now. The key thing that we're going to mess with is the caption, right? So for this caption, this one is written for a different event on a different day. So the first thing I'll want to change is make sure that, okay, I shot these, this caption's from Tuesday, July 23rd. Well, I shot this on August 24th, right? As you can tell by my file names. So let's check my calendar. What day was August 24th? August 24th. A Saturday. Is that correct? No, 2024. I shot on August 1st. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing. It's year, month, day in my file names. So August 1st, that's Thursday. Great. So I'll change that. Thursday. I spelled it wrong. Change the month. August 1st. Start there. Brooklyn, New York, that's correct. Clinton Hill neighborhood. This is in the same neighborhood. I know that. So I'm going to write a batch caption that applies to all these photographs, right? So these photographs are not residents gathering outside the hall. So I'm going to just get rid of that. So as we scroll through these, we can see that these are images of migrants spending their afternoon in the park, right? So back to my template. If I hit close, it saves the changes I made. So I'm going to go with past the afternoon. I don't want to like use since this is a batch caption, it's a generic caption. It's going to apply to all the photographs. I want to make it as kind of straightforward as possible, one that'll apply the most broadly, and then I'll go in and tweak it. I'll tweak it for each individual photograph that is a select. Migrants past the afternoon at, all right, I better check my notebook real quick. The name of this park was Steuben Park, Steuben. I know that because I had it written down in my notebook. Migrants passed the afternoon at Steuben Park in the Clinton Hill neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York, Thursday, August 1st, 2024. Great. Okay, now my second sentence for this one is the context for this sentence is actually applicable here because the guys in this park are also living in a context similar to the other picture. So I'm going to get rid of this second part here. Neighborhood residents have organized because that's not key to this story. But over 4,000 migrants are sheltered nearby at the hall shelter complex. And then I'm going to say, but many who have lost their privileges now sleep in this nearby park. Great. Okay, so that's a pretty basic second sentence, but it tells you who these people are and kind of what's this context of the story. Now, in order to append this caption to all these pictures, I'm going to go down here to the bottom and I'm going to hit in this bottom row of command boxes, I'm going to hit apply station template to selected. As you can see, I have all the images in the folder selected. Boom. Now it's going through and applying them to all the pictures. Takes a quick second. And if you can get in the habit of kind of doing this, you know, whenever you dump your card to put on your hard drives, whenever you dump your card to kind of, you know, archive your pictures. I mean, you can't I can't explain to you the joy of opening a picture from 15 years ago and it having a generic caption on it that just tells me the most basic stuff, and I don't have to write all that from scratch. It is amazing. So now, as you folks are familiar with, I've already kind of edited through this, so I'm going to go to some pictures that I selected, right? Okay. Here's some of the pictures I selected to send in for publication. I'm going to open one up. Let's caption this picture, this pretty lame picture of this police tape here. I'm going to hit this I. Now this gives me, I'm not in a template. Now I'm in the IPTC information for this specific photograph, right? So now I'm going to tweak this batch caption so it applies to this particular picture. In this picture, we see there's some police tape kind of marking off a crime scene. So I'm going to change this, the beginning of this first sentence to police tape marks off a crime scene at Steuben Park in the Clinton Hill neighborhood of Brooklyn. Over 4,000, but you'll see that the second sentence still kind of applies, right? I could add another sentence here. After a recent murder, migrants living nearby have serious concerns about their security, right? I could add a little extra context maybe because this kind of police line picture kind of in some ways kind of asks for that. And then I've got my photographer credit at the bottom there. I hit OK. Now that picture has got different caption. Then if I go to the next one, you can see that this next one still has the batch caption on it, but this one retains the specific caption for that image. Hope that makes sense. Great. Go back to this, my considerations. Okay. So that kind of is my overview of caption writing. And we can get into some more questions kind of in the Q&A at the end. I think we've been going pretty hard on captions, so I'm going to shift gears for a second now and chat with you guys real quick about journaling. I'm going to redo my screen share to get back to my kind of presentation here. Loading. Okay, here we go. All right. So the other thing that you know the good folks at Seven and Foundry and Photoings wanted me to talk a little bit about today is the practice of kind of journaling and keeping journals, right? I'm not an expert on this. There's like all kinds of different methodologies to this, and people who have like very rigid kind of journaling sort of protocols or sort of practices. But luckily, I've been successful at doing this for the majority of my adult life. And I want to go into a little bit about kind of how I write in journals and kind of what I think about it. Again, if folks have questions, I'll try to kind of get somewhere. But this is probably me a little better to talk about kind of at the end. So if you have questions, oh wait, somebody had a question about the captioning real quick. Do you add a caption to the raw file, and would the caption appear in a JPEG TIFF file later if you change the format? Excellent question. Yes, I add the captions to the raw files. And yes, every version that you make from that raw file should carry that caption along with it. So that's exactly how I work. I shoot raw files, and then I make JPEG or TIFF files for publication. I tone them and save them as JPEGs or TIFFs, depending on what the publication is, if it's a newspaper, wire service, or if it's a magazine, and it carries that caption along with it. Now, generally speaking, I'll probably only do the final captions on the JPEGs and the TIFFs, right? The ones that are actually going to go for publication. But I'm always trying to have that batch caption, that generic caption on all the raw files. And sometimes I've gotten in the practice of nowadays, if I have a long day of reporting and I'm photographing like a bunch of different subjects or a bunch of different locations, I'll do 5 or 6 batch captions for that day, right? I'll do one batch caption when I was in this village. I'll do another batch caption for this village. I'll do another one for this village, just to just to you know make it make sure that in the future when I go back, I'm not going to confuse myself and make a correct and make a mistake in the captioning in the future. So good question. Thanks. So keeping some journals. This is a picture of a box of my journals from 2005 until now. That was the year when I kind of converted to a sort of consistent type of journal kind of book. And so I just can, and it's really perfect because I can save them all in this one little box and they all sort of fit in there nice. In the years before that, they were kind of all over the place, but I'll show you a picture of that. So I didn't start keeping journals until I was in college. So I was probably 20 years old or 21 when I started. I didn't do it kind of as a kid. I was never like, I didn't keep a diary. It wasn't important for me. I wish I had, I certainly wish I had, but I didn't for whatever reason, mainly because I was lazy and sort of stupid. But when I was in college, in university, I had a class, a women in the law class, and we were grappling with legal issues that affected women and women's rights. And so the professor, Dr. Susan Hare, I remember it was weird because it was a very analytical kind of political science law briefing cases kind of law class, but she required us to keep a journal over the course of the class. So we had to hand them in and she read them. And when the class was over, the professor told me that she really liked what I had been doing, that I engaged, like I worked really hard on my journal and she liked the writing and she encouraged me to keep going. So I did. I thought, oh, wow, this professor thinks I'm good at something. I might as well keep going. The truth is, that was 30 years ago. And the truth is that over that time, I'm still a pretty mediocre journal writer. I try to do it regularly, but I can be very inconsistent about it. These days, I think I'm getting a little better because I'm putting a lot more energy into it in the last couple of years. I'm trying to put it like right at the forefront. But, look, I can be very lazy and unfocused and inconsistent like all of us. And so there's lots of gaps. Like I miss things sometimes. I mean, I don't think I've never gone like a year where I didn't write in a journal, or even I probably don't go too awful many months when I don't write in a journal sometimes, especially years ago. But these days I try to be at least have stuff, not every day, but at least every week, if I can. So after years of writing in these notebooks, I've identified a couple of patterns. One is that I tend to write when I'm in it's kind of similar circumstances, which is a similar circumstance or similar mood or similar kind of psychological state. And two, when big events in my life kind of come up, I often don't pause to record them. And it's a problem that I've tried to get better at over the years, and I'm still struggling to be better at it. And what it's done is it's kind of funny, like when I go back and read these journals, oftentimes, since I'm writing in a kind of similar circumstance or similar mood, the the actual journal entries tend to kind of read the same over the years. Usually I'm like, you know, kind of lonely and frustrated about something and kind of complaining into my journal, which is not a great look. But I've done it so much now at this point, I'm trying to get a little bit better about not only doing that. I also tend to write in my notebooks in like a consistently narrative style, right? So I am kind of, that means like I'm writing like complete sentences. I woke up today, this happened, then this happened, and in the evening we went and did this. I don't necessarily think that's the best way to do it. And I've experimented with other modes, using kind of bullet points or notes or, free association or just kind of like writing down names. Um, None of that has really stuck for me. At the end of the day, when I sit down to write, I automatically sort of think in stories and think in narratives. So I'm like, today I woke up early and I usually say something about the weather and I usually say something about what time it is. And I try to write, I try to always date my entries and I try to always write where I am, because sometimes if I sit down to write a journal entry and I just start complaining about something, I don't know if I wrote that in, you know, Brooklyn or in, Cal or in San Francisco. I don't know. The important thing is to figure out kind of what works for you? What makes you take the time to sit down and put words on paper? That's the key thing. And I can say that like now after so many years, all these journals are kind of like a record of my life, Um, a lot of it is honestly pretty embarrassing to read. Like a lot of it's really bad writing, and a lot of it I'm not talking about things that I know are more important than what I was talking about in the journals. But you know, all that being said, I wrote them for me, and the truth is, like, I'm grateful to have them. I'm grateful that they exist. And at this point, I'm 51 this year. I like curse every single day that I didn't take the time to sit down and write in my journal. Like I really, looking back, I can't believe how many days I let go without sitting down and writing. Sorry. So I thought, real quick, I would kind of show you guys a couple of different examples of entries from over the years. I'll read through a couple of them. They're like, I'm not going to read the whole thing because we don't have all day, and we've been going for a good bit now. I'm sure you guys are busy and we want to have some time for questions, but I'll read through a couple of them so you can kind of get a sense of kind of what kind of stuff I'm writing. Um, you know, this is from an early journal, 1998. So I'd only been really writing in a journal for about 4 years at that point and quite inconsistently. Um, and this was from well before I ever thought I would be a photographer or a photojournalist. This is from a road trip that I was on with one of my good friends for months. We were living in a van driving around, and the trip had come to an end. Um, so end of traveling, 10/14/1998, Odessa, Missouri. So this is how it ends. Today we watched our van loaded up onto the wrecker. Now we sit in the cool shade and wait for the goddamn Greyhound. Fate has dealt us a dirty hand. It's as if she reached out, stretched out, and and slashed that coolant wire herself. Part of the problem is this is written in a really bad handwriting. This is not my normal handwriting, but my arm was broken when I wrote this, so that's why it looks all crazy. More than once on this trip, I've looked around me and felt the intensity of a dream realized. Last night, standing in a dusty parking lot, looking over the dim lights of Odessa, I felt deep in my bones the full realization of a dream that has fallen right before my eyes. Deciding the consequences, this way or that, a strong drive to forge ahead, keep going all the way to San Francisco, damn it all. But I woke up this morning early and watched the pink sunrise over the power lines and mobile homes. I realized I was watching the world through the windows of this van for the last time. It's over. Even if I kept going, it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same trip. It would be another trip. We were together at the starting gate. We ought to be together at the finish line. It's just that they have moved the bar on us. Last night, we took our food crate and a load of clothes to the Odessa Community Center. Then we went to Bob and Shirley's bar and got drunk. We shot a bad game of pool and played every good song on the jukebox. We sat and talked, laughing and recounting old trips, other breakdowns, the good times and the bad times that now, properly aged, have become the good times as well. We said goodbye to Bob the barkeep, who hates these damn bastards, the cops, and was so good that he wouldn't let us tip him. He just used the money to give us more beers. We went back to the van with some food. We ran around and lit off fireworks, burning ourselves and not feeling it. We sat in the van listening to sad songs. We talked about girls, love, sex. We laughed like hell. And when we got quiet to sing the good parts, or maybe just think about them. We got tired, pissed out most of the beer we'd rented, went to sleep. It was one of the funnest nights of our lives, wandering down the gravel shoulder, stumbling drunk and lost in middle America. So now we wait in this grassy field, warm breeze, warm sun. Andrew picks while I scribble. The Odessa law enforcement establishment stops by periodically to run our licenses through the damn computer. We've walked up and down those streets so many times. We are the mysterious bearded man and the mysterious one-armed man. So, clearly that was not a kind of entry that has to do with my kind of professional life or my photo practice, right? That's just like a personal entry from a journal from years ago. But that gives you a sense of like what I'm trying, of how I was writing in it at the time. This is one from Indiana. When when I lived with my grandfather, I showed you guys a picture earlier of the project I kind of did on my grandfather, and this was from a full shoot, more than 10 years, 11 years before I ever did that project. But this was when I was living with him, and kind of at that point I wasn't even a photographer. I was trying to figure out if I was going to train horses. Um, that's a little better example of kind of my handwriting. It's not as bad as the first one was. Um, this is an entry from 2005 once I had kind of, started trying to work as a photographer, and I was working in Guatemala. Um, I'll read through this one real quick because I think it's kind of instructive, and it's a little it's kind of representative of how kind of how I was how I kind of evolved the journal writing to kind of, now that I was trying to have a professional practice, now that I was trying to engage in the world in a different way other than just kind of like a vagabond kind of living in a van, right? So July 12th, 2005. Breakfast at Mariola's, then went next door to find Valerio. We took off for the cafetal, spent the whole morning walking around. He showed me all the new paths and the waterfall with its primitive cabana, the ecotourism project. For years, they have been trying to get it going, and it always seems just over the horizon. There are 5 other foreigners here, 2 Americans and 3 from Denmark, supposedly doing some kind of volunteer work. Valerio pauses on the trail. He tells me that walking on these trails reminds him a lot of walking in the mountains during the war. He tells me about their first real battle that they call the baptism. It was in San Marcos. The army came in, almost reached their camp. They fought from 6 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. They only suffered 1 casualty and no deaths. The army was not so fortunate. The only weapons the guerrillas had were old carbine rifles stolen from the National Police and a couple of shotguns. The other compañeros were terrified, shaking, but Valerio less so. He had just gotten back from Nicaragua. He told me about 1979. He left Guatemala as a student to Costa Rica, went on to Panama, then to Havana, 3 months there, receiving training, then to Nicaragua with a group of 25 Guatemaltecos, international volunteers. They fought against Somoza, and it was only a few months until he fell. Back to Panama, then Havana again for a checkup, then back to Panama to enter Guatemala through Costa Rica as a student. In the capital, he met with Gaspar Ilom, talked about the experience, then on to the mountains, where he fought until 1996. We talked for hours about the war, about operations, about the taking of fincas. He explained to me how the guerrilla would leave messages for each other in the field, a mark or a sign, and then bury it, maybe with some money to buy provisions. He showed me how to write messages with a stick on the bottom of a leaf. Queremos frijol, 25 pounds, 12705. And on the bottom of coffee leaves with a pen. He explained the resupply, how often messengers going into the city would get snagged by the G2 military intelligence. I asked him about the area. Why weren't there such great massacres here? He said it was because of the finqueros, that if they massacred people here, there wouldn't be anyone to work. This is key. This, among other reasons, explains why there were such brutal massacres in the heavily indigenous areas. He talked at length about the relations with the population, how it didn't help them to kill folks because of the message it left for others. So for me, there's a ton of stuff just in that passage that I don't even remember from that day. I don't even remember from that year, So to go back and read that is, I can't express to you how grateful I am that I even have that written down. That guy Valerio was an ex-guerrilla combatant in Guatemala. That entry gave a little bit of his background and his life. We were friends for years. He died probably 10 years ago. And, even the fact that I took the time to write that down, that's probably the majority of the biographical information that even exists on him in the world, you know? So it's quite valuable, and any time you can make to write that kind of stuff down is worth its weight in gold. Um, this is pretty funny. This is from the same 2000. Is this 2005 journal? Yeah, this is 2005 journal. This is pre when no one was using like, Apple calendars or like Google calendars or anything. So this is like literally a month-long calendar of reporting in Guatemala that I like sketched out so I could remember everything I did and everywhere I was. Um, Here's another entry. This is also quite typical of my journal. Sometimes I'll write like really short, just kind of impressions, just to kind of like cement down a day, and even remember kind of where I was, sort of in the narrative. So this is from uh, April 23rd, 2014. Leaving for Kandahar in the morning. The old feelings back, the sharpness, the quiet unease. It's like Azam said the other day. You're always cheating the violence in this country. Let's hope I can win this time. Right. So this is just a quick kind of like, reflection to myself before I take off to southern Afghanistan on a trip that I anticipated would maybe involve some violence or involve some risk. So an interesting thing about, I was writing in these journals for all these years, and it actually kind of evolved into another practice of mine, which is dispatch writing. So for years, I've written these kind of long, would end up being like Word documents or PDFs that I email to like it started out as a kind of small list of friends and some family. And then over the years it grew to like a much larger list of friends and acquaintances and some professional contacts. And these dispatches were a way for me to kind of like be communicating both my reporting but also my experience to folks that I was like out of touch with when I was in, circumstances very different from the ones that most of us share back at home, One thing I found is that having an audience to write to kind of made it much easier to spill more onto the page. Um, when I thought that I was writing for this, audience of, I always write it like I'm writing it to one person, but it's an audience of like, that sometimes it got up to maybe 120 people. That gave me a kind of motivation. A lot of times in my journal, when I'm feeling like I'm just writing to myself, uh, I'm not very good at it. Like I'm not very good at kind of at writing a lot when I'm thinking about writing to myself. When I'm thinking about writing to someone else, I'm much more attuned to like, oh, I got to tell them about this and I got to tell them about this and tell them about this. And so I end up getting a lot more on the page. The journals and the dispatches aren't identical, and they end up kind of feeding each other over the years, right? So like some dispatches grow out of journal entries that I would write, and then some journal entries like would grow out of dispatches. Like I would sit down and write a kind of dispatch about a story I was working on, about an operation I was on. Most of my dispatch writing is from my years covering Afghanistan, and then I would go back in my journal and like refer to this Word doc I had written where I was filling stuff in my journal. Um, Both the dispatches and the journals helped prepare me to write my own stories, which has become a big part of my practice. So, learning to be an effective writer is a pretty complicated thing, right? It takes a lot of work. You folks don't know a ton of writers who also take really great photographs at a really high level. There's a few, but there's not a ton. And there's not a lot of photographers who can write at a really high level, like writing for newspapers and magazines. They're two very different jobs. They require different kind of thinking, especially like in the field. So they can be quite complicated, quite difficult to do. But all these years of writing in notebooks and writing in journals and then writing dispatches kind of built up my skill in a way that I could start kind of writing my own stories. And now at this point, you know, uh, depending on the circumstances, I tend to write a lot of stories, and they're either kind of enterprise stories that I, research and propose, and that there's just never going to be a budget for a reporter for, right? And so I end up writing them, or depending on the circumstances, sometimes they end up being news stories that that the publications will task me to write. So on the left here is a screenshot of a story that I wrote, a piece I did for the New York Times opinion section, Afghanistan 1 year after the fall, that I published in 2022. I went back a year after the fall, and kind of photographed. I made a photo essay, and then I wrote a piece about kind of what a year of Taliban rule meant. And then on the right is a story that I wrote kind of during the fall. It was published on September 20th, 2021. So just right after, I stayed in Afghanistan for the fall of the country to the Taliban. So I was in Afghanistan on August 15th when the Taliban took control, and stayed for about 3.5, almost 4 more months, documenting and covering, this new reality for the country. Um, and so this was one of the first kind of reported stories, other than kind of like a daily news dispatch, about women's education, girls' education in Afghanistan. There's a couple more examples. On the left here is a story I wrote last year in Guatemala, about the presidential election there. I've covered, this is my 4th presidential election I covered in Guatemala. And again, I pitched a photo essay, and then a written piece. This was actually quite a long written piece. I would guess it was around 3,000 words, which is quite long. That's almost like getting in a magazine territory, that I did for The Intercept. And then on the right is another, you can't see the writing part, but because the way the web presentation is, but I wrote a piece about veterinary, equine horse veterinary care on the Standing Rock Reservation years ago. So yeah, examples of stories that kind of grown out of my writing practice. That's like a big part of my photo practice. And so kind of the last one I'll show is, this is like a quite recent excerpt from one of my journals. Also, I just noticed, weirdly, from Kandahar, from June 17th, 2022. When I was working on that photo essay, I was just showed you guys a screenshot of. Friday, 6/17/20, June 17th, 2022. Kandahar. Late start this morning. Went to the shrine of the cloak of the Prophet. Haji Zukrullah Akhundzada was the Motawali, the keeper of the cloak. The shrine was beautiful, mirrored mosaics climbing the walls, huge chandeliers, and at the back, a black shrouded box. A crowd of young guys gathered around. Haji told us the history of the cloak. He said he was there the day Mullah Omar came and came to take on the cloak. He said they were all emotional, crying, praying. He was a sweet guy, excited to show us around. Went by the Mullah Omar mosque for prayer, but it was locked up. Went to the Red Mosque, a government-controlled mosque. Met the son of the Imam. Sat while he recited some Tirana. Then attended the prayer. Drew way more attention than I was comfortable with, but everyone was cool. Last 2 days, chasing this history. Not so great for the images, but certainly moved, certainly inside the mystery of faith, inside the desire to believe, the mystery of Mullah Omar, and why this small group of guys were so successful for so many years, why they found themselves at the center of the world events. Inside it, trying to see around it, trying to connect threads. Evening in Arghandab, it was nearly empty, the river way, way down from where it was a month ago, the drought. Drove out the Aruzgan road to the Talib checkpoint on the hill. The guys were chill. They let us hang out. I made a ton of pictures. They weren't very good. Jim Marathy used to say I was always trying to get it in the camera, shooting and not thinking or feeling. Been doing that a lot the last 6 weeks. Hell, I've been doing that a lot the last 20 years. So yeah, that's a kind of example of, the kind of entries from a kind of more recent journal. A couple kind of final thoughts here. For me, it was natural that my journal writing would become a part of my photo practice. It's proved an invaluable companion for me over the years of photographing. I think it's a mistake to concentrate too hard on the quality of writing in your journal. It should be a place for you to work out ideas, deal with frustration, rant if you need to. That said, I think it's good to be aware that in many ways your journal is the distillation of your voice. Be open to that and listen to the times when you hear your own voice, and then try to go deeper or try to go towards it, right? Also, kind of, you can't beat yourself up about not writing, and you have to avoid the guilt that comes with ignoring your notebook for a time. That's counterproductive. It always feels like a chore, uh, but every time that I make time for it, I sleep a lot better at night. It feels very satisfying. And I'll kind of tell you one of my favorite quotes. I can't remember the writer who said this, but one of my favorite quotes about writing is that I hate writing. We all hate writing, but I love having written, right? So like the actual act of it sometimes can feel a little torturesome, but as soon as you sit back from the notebook or you sit back from your computer screen and look at the pages that you generated that day, it's an incredibly satisfying feeling, and there's kind of nothing that replaces. The only thing better is getting out and making a bunch of strong photographs. So yeah, that's some thoughts to kind of if you decide you're gonna make this part of your practice, or get yourself a notebook and start scribbling in it. um those are some thoughts. So yeah, that kind of concludes my discussion. Nika, thanks so much for hosting me. Thank you guys for watching. There's some contact info on the screen. I'm easy to find on Instagram, or on email or on the web. So yeah, no problem. And I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everybody's attention. So I'm happy to answer some more questions, Nika, if you think that's the move.
Yeah, definitely. We still have time. I saw there's two questions still. I don't know if from Yosef you already answered, because I had to run to the toilet in between. And there's a question from Anastas about what do you think about writing journals compared to making voice recordings?
Great. So I always I've seen that making voice recordings like in movies and stuff, and I think that that's an interesting practice. I mean, I know writers that helps them out. Like I have reporter friends who like make voice recordings as they're reporting, to kind of as they're observing things. I think it's very smart. Um, but I don't think it's a replacement um, for writing in journals, right? Like I think it's super smart to make voice recordings of yourself to remember kind of individual things. But if you're not going to go back, and then it's quite easy now to use. There's like a variety of even AI applications, or even not, to kind of transcribe voice notes, right? So you have them in text. But I can say for sure that if I would have relied on only audio recordings or voice recordings, instead of taking the time to sit and write, like writing is a different practice. It demands it's a different intellectual discipline. Um, I kind of wish I could make voice recording. If I talk into a voice recorder to myself, I sound like an idiot, or I feel like an idiot. Like I can't do it. I admire people who can do that, but I also know for sure that my friends who do that also do a ton of writing in addition to that, right? So uh, using, it's only kind of bolstering that practice. So thanks for that question. Joseph, if you haven't been good about journaling, what do you think about going back and trying to write notes about past projects? I think it's a great idea. I think if you go back and sit down, especially before your memory kind of fades, I think that's an amazing idea to go back and do. I'm actually kind of wrestling with that right now because I'm editing. I have all this dispatch writing from all these years in Afghanistan, and I'm working on a book, so I have to kind of work with it. And I'm wrestling with that line of how much do I preserve? Because, a lot of it's really bad writing. And a lot of it is stuff that I wrote down that was wrong. I was wrong about that. Now I know, after years of reporting, now I know the truth. And so now I'm wrestling with that line of how much do I correct, or how much do I leave, and then tell and show people how wrong I was about stuff. So I think it's a great idea. Um, and what I would do is just open up a note, just grab yourself a notebook, and then just go down and write down. Like, you don't date. I wouldn't date your pages because you might get confused later. But I would write like, 2007, and then like stuff that go back and kind of do it in chronological order as best you remember it, or not. Just sit down and get it all out. But getting it all out is really important.
Yeah, if there's more questions, or if you want to just join us on the screen as well, feel free to raise the hand and I can promote you to a panelist. We know we're very open at Seven Community to have all of you join us as well in the debate. So yeah, let's wait a bit with Victor just for if there's more questions. I would say that, yeah, we had a project now at Seven Community called Square Mile, which focused on local stories with kind of global impact. And I saw some of the contributing photographers here among the audience, and we worked with them a lot on this style of captions that you were explaining. So I'm just checking with the team if we can share the full guideline also on how to do better research, how to check for consent, what really to take into account when you're doing captions or longer extended captions. So know that all of you that are here today, you will receive that in your email. Maybe not today, but hopefully start of next week. But yeah, if there's no more questions for Victor.
Yeah.
Doug,
Well, I hope
no, Doug raised the hand. So Doug, if you agree, I'll promote you to speaker. Let me promote to panelist. Yes, that's how we do it. If you can come on screen, if you just want to talk, you can also just talk. Panelists. Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Vic, how are you?
Hi, Doug.
How are you? Question for you. I'm gonna try and be short-winded. Switching from your hat of PJ to documentary photographer, your best practice when you're in the PJ field, you're throwing your metadata templates in there. You file, you upload. When you're in your practice of long form, I guess my workflow, I know it's workflow, but I guess my issue that I run into is you go out, you're running a couple cameras, you're come home, you upload 2,000 pictures. Am I going to go through and caption everyone in this longer form? And I don't know if this is a statement, but I guess in my mindset, it keeps me away from feeling like the work is just to be filed and uploaded and sent for an editorial purposes versus a connection to the work where I don't want to feel like I'm so ingrained in captioning right after the event, so that I remove myself of the, oh, that was the shot, mentality versus looking at the work from a, pulled back. Hey, so I guess I don't know if that's a statement, but more so your practice when you switch from PJ to documentary.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I totally get that. I tend to use a kind of pretty much the same, especially with the batch caption, because the batch caption is the batch caption, right? And really, it's like a placeholder, for meaning. Um, but you saw that for me, like even pictures about my family, I put an AP style caption on because I just find it such a useful and concise way to convey a lot of information in a very concise way. And so for me, it doesn't like in any way kind of like demean or bring down the value of my documentary or my personal work or like long form work. I mean, a bunch of those pictures I showed are from projects that have gone on for 20 years. It's ridiculous. Like the stuff's been going on forever. But I'll tell you that every time I open up and re-edit it, I just re-edited in the last year, I've re-edited every photo I've ever taken in Afghanistan since 2009. So it was thousands and thousands of pictures. And if I open up a folder, or I mean, and a lot of them are analog, right? So they're contact sheets. If I open up a scan, and that's another one too, is having the discipline to go back and make those captions, to append those to your scans. I all the time forget to do that, and that's hard because you don't really batch caption a bunch of scans, right? Because each one's kind of different. What's the point? You don't have that many of them, so that's a pain too. And I'm lazy. I don't want to open that thing up and write an individual capture each scan, but the overwhelming sense of joy if I open up a scan from 2014 and it's got a caption on it, I'm like, oh, thank you. Thank you to my former self for doing that. So here's an idea for you. If you feel like that you want to keep a kind of division of labor or division of focus for yourself between your kind of like daily grind kind of news stuff, and you're like more personally invested, like long form work that you're really kind of trying to develop over an arc of time, maybe what I would do is to like come up with two different caption templates, right? Come up with a new kind of caption template for your personal work that isn't quite as cold or isn't quite as stark as a strictly AP. Like using that AP as a style as a starting off point, but like loosen it up, you know. Or even you can use some of those IPTC fields to fill in stuff that's like, you know, that refers to your personal work, that traces the arc of it in ways that's helpful for you. And then maybe that gives you, and you know, you can save all those out. Like I have a folder on my desktop for every year. I have 2024 captions, and then I have a 2023 captions, 2022 captions. I have that for all the years I've been working, and I just save those saved out IPTC like little files in
Mhm.
there. And so then, you know, if I have to go shoot another Gaza protest, right, which I've done tons of this year, boom, I already have that, and they're almost all in Manhattan, or I have some for Manhattan, some for Brooklyn. Great. I have that template caption I can drop in there, right? And then start from there and then rewrite it, change the things I need to change to update it. But you could also do that for different kinds of work. You could do that for your personal work. It doesn't include stuff that you don't need, you know, it doesn't
Yeah.
include your photo credit for whatever. That might help out.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, if you are working on long form personal work and you're not appending any kind of caption to it, I mean, even you might finish the work in a year or two and get it published, but when you revisit it in 20 years, you are going to kick yourself for not having taken the time to put that stuff on there, because it's amazing. I mean, I can't lie to you guys. It's amazing how fast my memory fades. I never thought it would. Tons of stuff. Every day there's stuff I don't write in a notebook because I think I'll never forget that. How would I ever forget that? I'll never forget that. And then in a year, I've forgotten it. So I do yourself a send a gift to your future self and do as much as you can, as much as you feel comfortable with. I hope that helps.
Yeah. Thank you. I think also too, for me, just the journaling aspect of, you know, documenting and what's in your head, you know, from that emotive sense of being in that place, may help. So that I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope it helps. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Nika.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Thank you for alerting us on that the slides are not working earlier. Maybe Victor, a question from me, advice on like journaling exercises. What do you advise let's say everyone here to do as the journaling exercise, to just go out, how to approach it maybe?
Oh, that's a great idea. That's excellent. And I you know, when I did the Foundry work, I did some when I was in grad school. I did a lot of creative writing, independent study. I did like we were on quarters. I did spent 2 quarters doing that with an amazing writer, and he gave me a lot of assignments. One that I think would be, and then when I did my Foundry workshop years and years ago, so at Foundry I did a writing workshop for photographers. So everybody in my workshop not only had to produce their photo story, they also had writing assignments that were due kind of over the course of the week, and so that at the end of the week they had a body of writing to go along with their photo story. That was, I think most of them found extremely valuable to use. And it was a bunch of different kinds of assignments. But to your point, I gave people a few different kinds of assignments. And one that I really like it's good for reporters because it's kind of fun and good for photographers is this is kind of more of a reporting exercise, but but I like having people go out and try to like eavesdrop on something, like go out and sit in a place. And you can apply this to your own life too. Like try to take your notebook, or even your phone, your notes app. And the next time you go out with friends, the next time you go out on a trip with your family, the next time you're out on an assignment or something, write down a bunch of observations and try to remember like what people were saying. Try to remember like dialogue, try to remember what people were talking about, and then try to recreate that on your journal page. It's such an interesting it's such an interesting exercise, and you realize really quick how hard it is to remember like individual dialogue. Or shoot, even like I'm sorry, I can't remember who asked the question, but maybe you could even make a voice memo and then write a journal entry from that. that'd be a really good one, right? You spend an evening out with friends or family at dinner, spend a few minutes voice recording, and then go home and write an observational kind of journal entry. You know, we were out tonight and the discussion was, but try to get into the dialogue. What were people talking about? The discussion was back and forth. So they were arguing, or they were loving the same film, or they were talking about this political point, and uh, she was saying this, and she was saying that, and then he's chimed in with this, like trying to get that in your journal. It's a real challenge. And kind of what you were saying, Doug, about, honestly, I think one of my big challenges when I read other friends writing, I find that it's actually quite difficult for me, which is strange because like psychologically, it's easy for me to be very aware of what I'm thinking and feeling. But on the journal page, it can be a little difficult for me to actually get it down. And so I'm trying to be better at reflecting on like, okay, yeah, today I got up and I went and did this and had breakfast here and we drove there and I took some pictures here. But like, what was I thinking about? Like what do I think about the things that I did today? Kind of like pulling back, like that little extra step is valuable. And I've found over the years that I'm not very good at it. So that's something I want to improve upon. Does that help? Does that make sense, Nika?
100%.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, thank you so
Great.
much. So I think yes,
Yeah.
we're slowly closing. It's been 2 hours, great 2 hours. If there's maybe a last question, please just write it in the Q&A. I will just share my. Oh, there is a question. Okay. Will you read it, Victor, or should I?
Yep. I'll read it.
All right.
Do you have any advice? Do you have any advice about journaling a diary for a photojournalist who lives in countries where they're at risk of getting arrested, like Iran? Have you ever been in this kind of situation? That's a great question, an excellent question. Um, and I have been in that kind of a situation before where you're moving in and out of a place where with an authoritarian government and you're worried about your notebook being picked up. I think there's a couple interesting things you can do for that, right? I have thought about that. And I'm sure that you guys get a lot of training on all kinds of digital security, which I'm also not very good at. But I find that analog security is also something to kind of consider. One thing I would think about doing specifically is making yourself a kind of like code to some degree, right? Like maybe just use initials for names and initials for place names, you know? Um, that's one kind of thing you can sort of do. And if you do that, if someone does haul you in, of course, and you're questioned, like that's going to be a whole different realm. But I can say that like in a place that's still kind of to some degree under the rule of law, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for them to get a conviction of you or to use it as evidence against you. If you say, well, J doesn't stand for Jamal, it stands for Jawad, and they didn't do anything wrong. Oh, okay, well, there you go. Or also it might be a thing where you keep your personal journaling and your kind of personal diary maybe a little bit separate from your reporting kind of notebooks and your reporting journal, and make that reporting journal a little bit more coded or a little bit more secure, and then your kind of personal journal and diary a little more kind of open. But I think you bring up an excellent point. And I don't think there's an easy answer for that. But remember, your journal, I think, primarily is not the repository of your reporting. I think it's primarily a place for you to kind of practice the act of writing, practice the act of thinking, And I know I'm not naive that in Iran, even that for many, many people, especially women, is illegal, is repressed. But those are a couple suggestions. I hope they kind of help a little bit. But I understand the plight for sure.
Okay, thank you, Victor. I would say that we're done with the Q&A. I just have something to share from I'll just share my Discord because we encourage everyone to join our Discord server where we update you daily on events. So if there's still people here in the session that maybe don't have access, just write us to community at 7.academy, 7 as VII. And then I will just alert you because we have 2 more events this week that are not organized by us, but by our partners. Tomorrow, you have an event on how to apply for grants from William Eugene Smith Fund, because you know the deadline is approaching. And then on Friday, we were lucky again to receive invitation to the event from Joop Swart masterclass from World Press Photo, and it's called Alternative Careers in Photography. So yeah, just alerting you that check our Discord and join those 2 events as well. And then we will have a deadline approaching for editing workshop for Arabic speakers. So yeah, do send me more questions if you would like to know more about the editing workshop. But yeah, this is really just briefly from me on the program in the next days. Victor, really was such a pleasure to learn from you, to see your projects and to see how you approach journaling and how you approach captions. And I think, yeah, we all learned a lot because as we mentioned in the beginning, it's really, it can make also the project and how professional you are. And when you go maybe to talk to editors, they will really see the quality as well in captions as in your photography. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to endear you to editors if you can write some really effective captions. It makes their lives easy. But really, like I was telling Doug, it's a gift to your future self. So I hope it was helpful. I hope it gave you guys some things to think about and some tools that you can implement. So good luck. And I can't wait to see the work everybody produces as you guys are learning in this forum. It's great.
Yeah, we have a wonderful community and wonderful partners as well at PhotoWings who suggested you for this session. So we're really grateful. And yeah, I would close it with this. We appreciate really your time and all the advice, and all the best to everyone.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you guys. Have a
Bye
good day.
bye.
Bye bye.